Well, Dr. Erler is a graduate of the Claremont Graduate School. He's a professor at Cal State San Bernardino, as well as being a senior fellow of the Claremont Institute. He's the author of numerous books and essays, including The American Polity and articles on the 14th Amendment, affirmative action, and the political philosophy of the American founders, to name just a few. Professor Erler is also the author, with John Marini and Tom West, of The Founders on Citizenship and Immigration. It's a great pleasure to introduce to all of you Dr. Ed Erler to talk tonight on illegal immigration. Ed. And we're going to film this, by the way. So Ryan Williams is back there with a camera.
Keep your clothes on,
right? So behave yourself.
Thank you for that introduction, Brian. It's always a pleasure to speak to a Claremont Institute audience. You know, Bill Bennett was also my boss at one time when I worked at the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the most memorable words he ever spoke to me was, "You're fired." And I'll never forget those words. Well, we're here to speak about immigration, but most particularly about illegal immigration. It's interesting that the Constitution doesn't say anything about immigration. Congress has the exclusive power to pass uniform rules for naturalization. Presumably, by extension, by reasonable extension, this means that Congress also has the exclusive power to regulate immigration. Let me just give you a little bit of a preview of what we've done in immigration over the years. The framers, of course, were quite explicit about immigration. They believed that we should invite people to the country. After all, we were going to need a lot of people. We had vast resources, an extensive country, and to develop these resources, we were going to need a great number of people. One of the complaints in the Declaration of Independence against King George was that he has prevented people from coming to America and becoming citizens of America. So they were open to immigration, but they were very clear. We need to invite useful people here, people who can contribute. But more importantly, we need to invite people who can adopt the Republican character, who love freedom, who have the habits of free human beings, who are industrious and independent people. Those were the kind of people that would become Republican citizens, and those are the kinds of immigrants that the framers contemplated. I think the turning point for modern immigration came in 1965, the Immigration Act of 1965. This was a part of a series of civil rights legislation. You remember the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was passed as an anti-discrimination law, that no one could be made to bear the burden in employment decisions of a racial classification or an ethnic classification. And I think it was a good expression of what the framers of the 14th Amendment meant by equal protection of the laws. But the Civil Rights Act of 1964 quickly transmogrified into an affirmative action program. A law that was designed to prevent discrimination became, at the hands of the bureaucracy and of the federal court system, a law which demanded discrimination so that equal opportunity would come to mean equal results. The test of equal opportunity in the minds of the bureaucracies and of the federal courts was, if there are equal results, if people end up equally, then of course this is a sure sign that equal opportunity was at work. Now, the Immigration Act of 1965, and this was in the words of President Johnson when he signed the bill, this was a kind of affirmative action program for immigration. President Johnson said, our immigration policies in the past have been cruel, and they have been racist, they have been unfair, and this is a law that seeks to remedy this racism and this unfairness. After all, our immigration policies, according to President Johnson, had concentrated on Northern Europe. These are the people that we invited in most fervently. After all, these were the people who were I must say, most like us, most likely to adapt to our customs and habits and so on and so forth. But we now came to believe that this was wrong. It was wrong to concentrate on this population, and now we were going to rectify that injury by putting a new emphasis upon immigration, and that is to say, we would invite people in, especially from third world countries or countries who are specifically unlike us. That the idea here, some cynics, and I must include myself among those cynics, believe that this was a specific attempt on the part of the administrative state to change the character and the composition of the American population, to diversify American population. And it was also an attempt, I believe, on the part of the administrative state to increase the number of dependent classes in the country. After all, the administrative state seeks to extend the reach of its power and to magnify its influence by the number of clients that it has within its care. And if you invite people in, let us say from third world countries, from economically depressed countries, countries in which people don't receive high levels of education and so on and so forth, if they become immigrants, they will be more likely to depend upon government than others. And I believe that this was an express attempt on the part of the administrative state to create a client class to change the population character of the country. And by and large, it has succeeded. This idea has continued in the administrative state's tolerance, and not only tolerance, but encouragement, I believe, of illegal immigration. More about that in a moment. In 1986, we had a bill in the Reagan administration called the Immigration Reform and Control Act, sometimes known as Simpson-Mazzoli after its two principal sponsors. This is a bill that gave amnesty to 3 million illegal immigrants who were present in the country. The idea here, and I can remember at the time I was working in Washington, just right after I was fired by Bill Bennett, I became a consultant to the Senate Judiciary Committee. And the argument there was this: we've got to do something about illegal immigration. I didn't disagree with that point of view. But the bargain was, we'll give amnesty, and the bill says quite explicitly, amnesty, we'll give amnesty to illegal immigrants in return for border control. We will crack down on the border, and that will be the end. I remember at the time I said, this is a false bargain, because the amnesty will be taken seriously and the border control will be ignored. And this was exactly what happened. And I think that the people who pressed for this bill in 1986 knew that this would be the first in a series of amnesty bills that would continue into the remote future. In 1996, we had another piece of legislation, which was called the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, and this was signed by President Clinton. It expanded the number of deportable crimes, and the court system is still today working out the extent to which deportable crimes were covered in this bill. And it ended sanctuary cities. You probably all heard of this business about sanctuary cities, where the police cannot inquire about the immigration status. No member, no city employee, social workers or welfare workers can inquire about anyone's immigration status, nor notify the immigration authorities if they find that somebody is in the country illegally. In Los Angeles, it's known as Special Order 40, and has been the subject of some controversy, especially in recent years. But this law in 1996 outlawed sanctuary cities, and it was upheld in a federal court of appeals in the Second Circuit. But of course, this law is widely ignored and of course not enforced. Also in this bill was that no illegal immigrant, no state could give to any illegal immigrant preferences in a university tuition or a state university tuition and things of that character. Well, we've had an interesting case in California where California passed a law that said that illegal immigrant students can receive in-state tuition at the state universities and the University of California. And this went to the California Supreme Court, which upheld the law in the face of an objection based upon the 1996 law. And the California Supreme Court said, well, you know, the law really doesn't say illegal immigration. It doesn't classify on the basis of illegal immigration, but only on the basis of residency. And since it's a law that doesn't really depend upon illegal immigration, but only classifies on the basis of residency status, it's constitutional. A clear fraud on the part of the California Supreme Court, but of course we're used to that by now. But this appeal on this was not taken up by the United States Supreme Court, so we'll have to wait for another case sometime in the future, or at least I hope in the future. Well, I think everyone gets the idea that and knows from experience, if we live in Southern California, we certainly know this, that illegal immigration continues to be a problem, and a problem of national concern. I think, as I was discussing with some people a few minutes ago, there's no doubt that the economy today, the recession, has helped to reduce the number of border crossers. But the numbers are still troubling. The numbers are down. Don't know whether it's as a result of better enforcement or people have less incentive to cross the border if they're not likely to get jobs, or whatever the case. But it's still a very troubling issue. And we also have to wonder, are there still jobs, and here I'm using President George W. Bush's phrase, are there still any jobs that America won't do in the light of this very severe recession that we are facing here? I suggest that there are probably not too many. What about crime? Crime remains a very, very big issue with respect to illegal immigration. It's difficult to get precise statistics on all of this, but in California, I think it's very clear that the incarceration rate in California prisons for illegal immigrants is double their numbers in the population. They account for slightly less than 7% of the population in California, but over 12% of the number of people who are incarcerated in California prisons. A Department of Homeland Security report that came out just 2-3 months ago reports that Mexican drug cartels are operating in more than 200 American cities. There are 50,000 members of the MS-13 gang. I don't know whether you've ever heard of this gang, but it's probably the most notorious and vicious gang in the world. I think it makes Al-Qaeda and people of that ilk look very tame. These are people that are involved in murder for hire, drug running, human smuggling, and every other crime you could possibly think of. So they're more than 50,000 strong in the U.S., and I think that this is a major concern. They have a lot of influence in California prisons. Some people say that MS-13 actually runs California prisons because the conditions in the California prisons and the legal restrictions put on California prisons, prison authorities have made it, our prison system ungovernable. And by the way, we just found out that the MS-13 gang had received weapons in this ATF Fast and Furious program. Did you all hear about that? They were a recipient of some of the weapons. And by the way, those weapons were paid for by stimulus funds. Huh? Well, paid for by us, of course, American taxpayers, but in the stimulus funds. And this was to help our economy recover. This is a very disturbing thing, not just from the point of view of illegal immigration, but this is a government that now wants to control all of our health care and monopolize a big proportion of our economy. I think this, if nothing else, would render them ineligible for